Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is James Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 11 waiver wire targets for the 2023 fantasy football season. Over the course of today's episode, I'm going to be talking about waiver wire prospects at a variety of different positions: running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, kickers, and defenses. Players that not only can help you in Week 11, considering we're dealing with injuries and, of course, 4 teams on bye. The teams on bye week are the Indianapolis Colts, Atlanta Falcons, New Orleans Saints, and New England Patriots. But hopefully, these players, besides giving you value in this week in order to fill in for a starting position, can potentially give you value for the remainder of the season in order to help you capture a 2023 fantasy football championship. I'll talk about each of these players individually. If you're looking for a specific player, there are timestamps down in the description. While you're down there, of course, subscribe, click the like button down below. We're making daily fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2023 season. I greatly appreciate the support. We're very close to reaching our goal of 81,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. Also, at the end of today's video, after I talk about all these fantasy football prospects in terms of waiver wire pickups, I'll be putting together a couple pick'em slips via Underdog Fantasy. Over the course of the last 2 weeks, I've had an 81% accuracy rating there, so hopefully we can continue our streak of success putting together a couple pick'em slips. For those of you who haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy, there's a link down in the description of the video. At this current moment in time, if you use code Andrew and make a first-time deposit minimum of $10, not only are you going to get the first-time deposit match up to $100, you'll get my rankings sent to you from my email individually to yours every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. These rankings are by position, by tier, includes flex rankings, half PPR, full PPR. So for those of you who are interested in, of course, drafting teams, putting together pick'em slips, and getting my rankings for the remainder of the season, check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility, and go ahead and sign up tonight before the game to take advantage of the new customer special of Josh Allen, 0.5 total yards. Thank you very much for all the support. Okay, let's talk about the running back position, beginning with Keaton Mitchell. This is the final stop on the Keaton Mitchell train. At this current moment in time, he's currently rostered in 47% of Yahoo leagues and 49% of sleeper leagues. After tomorrow's waiver wires run, I'm expecting him to be rostered in close to 60 to 65% of leagues. And at that point, it'll pretty much be done, and the likelihood of you being able to pick him up will be gone. So let's talk about what exactly he contributed in yesterday's game against the Cleveland Browns and why I have confidence in him being the #1 running back for a second consecutive week here for the waiver wire episode. Now, when we talk about Keaton Mitchell, we obviously have to mention Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, considering they're still contributing factors within this backfield. First and foremost, Gus Edwards played 28 of the 54 total offensive snaps. That's 52%. Of course, Gus Edwards' overall role is still there. He had himself a rushing touchdown on the goal line. He's going to continue to be relevant in that overall capacity. Justice Hill played 14 of the overall snaps, 26%. Unfortunately, Keaton Mitchell had the fewest snaps amongst all of the running backs for another consecutive week here. Only played 13 offensive snaps. That's 24%. He lined up in the backfield 10 times, once in the inline and twice out wide. Now, like I mentioned last week, he's giving me Devon Achane vibes in regards to Gus Edwards being the Raheem Mostert of this offense, Justice Hill being the Jeff Wilson Jr., and of course Keaton Mitchell, the young running back that could potentially take over this backfield with his overall opportunity if in fact they increase the volume of his opportunity. Yesterday in the game, his first rushing attempt, a 39-yard rushing touchdown. His first target of the game, a 32-yard reception on a screen pass. His second target of the game, lined up in the backfield, ran a wheel route, unfortunately dropped a 19-yard receiving touchdown. For those of you guys who are Lamar Jackson managers, there have been so many drop touchdowns over the course of this season that have absolutely impacted his fantasy value. It is unfortunate, but nonetheless, dropped a 19-yard receiving touchdown. His second rushing attempt of the game was a little bit of an end around. They lined him up outright, and obviously was sniffed out by the Cleveland Browns defense. It resulted in a -7-yard run. His third rushing attempt of the game, a 2-yard rushing attempt. His final target of the game, which technically isn't involved in his overall box score, had himself an end zone target. Unfortunately, it was intercepted, but the play was called back due to a penalty on the defense. So overall, 3 target opportunities, 3 rushing attempts. Not a lot of opportunity, yet he scored 13.1 fantasy points throughout the game. If they give him more volume as we continue, behind this offensive line, within the scheme overall, Keaton Mitchell can absolutely dominate. Just off of the few opportunities that he was given, he has looked fantastic over the course of the last 2 games. Either way, this is the final stop on the Keaton Mitchell hype train that continues for the remainder of the season. Moving on to our number 2, we have Devin Singletary. I had so much confidence yesterday that Devin Singletary would have just no production at all. I had faith that, going against the Cincinnati Bengals, which is a solid defense, and the fact that the Houston Texans offense haven't been able to run the ball steadily over the entire course of the season, I did not have 30 rushing attempts on my bingo card for Devin Singletary in week 10. Nonetheless, 30 rushing attempts for 150 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 22.6 fantasy points. Those are career highs for Devin Singletary. For any running back, 30 rushing attempts would be career highs. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, we saw Saquon Barkley do that, obviously because their quarterback got injured. But, CJ Stroud was there in the pocket, dominating once again for another consecutive week, yet they decided to run the ball 30 plus times. Nonetheless, the reason why I wanted to mention Devin Singletary is because going into this week against the Arizona Cardinals, they're a top 5 matchup at the running back position. If in fact Dameon Pierce is going to miss another consecutive game due to the ankle injury that has forced him to miss week 9 and 10, of course there will be value to be had if they continue to run the ball at the capacity which they did on Sunday against Cincinnati, and if they take out their aggression on the Arizona Cardinals in that capacity. Moving on to our number 3, we have Ty Chandler, the backup running back of Alexander Mattison. Now, as we all know, in week 9, unfortunately, Cam Akers' season-ending Achilles injury, second time in his career. In his overall absence, of course, Ty Chandler was given more opportunity. Ty Chandler at this current moment in time is only rostered in 8% of Yahoo leagues, 15% of sleeper leagues. The reason why I wanted to go ahead and bring your attention to Ty Chandler is because for those of you who have Alexander Mattison, you know that he left yesterday's game due to a concussion, unfortunately. Prior to Alexander Mattison leaving the game at the end of the third quarter due to the concussion, he played 33 offensive snaps and had 8 rushing attempts. Throughout that span of time, quarters 1 through 3, with Alexander Mattison healthy, Ty Chandler had himself 7 rushing attempts and scored himself a rushing touchdown within the game. Now, in the fourth quarter, of course, by himself, Ty Chandler took over this offense, was the primary running back, had himself a 29-yard rushing touchdown, which was unfortunately called back due to a holding call. Obviously, one of their offensive linemen pulled a defender down with him. It was a, inconsequential play. In the grand scheme, that defender would not have made the play, but the offensive lineman obviously got ran over and the play was called back nonetheless. Ty Chandler going into this week, they take on the Denver Broncos. It is an advantageous matchup. And with, of course, Alexander Mattison in the concussion protocol, the expectation, because of what we've seen based on averages over the entire season, as long as you're put into the concussion protocol, you're pretty much going to miss at least 1 week. So going into this week as a handcuff option that can start in week 11, Ty Chandler, an awesome play. Moving on to our number 4, we have Antonio Gibson. We mentioned him last week. Antonio Gibson, 4 of the last 6 games he has played, he has put up 8 or more fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. He has back-to-back games of 10 or more opportunities, 3 consecutive games of 5 or more receptions, all while yesterday Brian Robinson Jr. had himself 6 targets, 6 catches, 119 through the air, and 1 receiving touchdown. So overall, again, a lot of utilization within the running back room in terms of receiving work. As long as that continues to play out, Antonio Gibson absolutely will have value. Moving on to our number 5, we have Zach Charbonnet within the same matchup yesterday. Even though we did see Kenneth Walker get back to his normal self in terms of getting a high volume of rushing attempts, was utilized within the receiving game, obviously had himself a huge receiving touchdown there. If it wasn't for those overall statistics and the fact that Kenneth Walker had 20 total touches while Zach Charbonnet had 10 total touches, you would think that Kenneth Walker played majority of the offensive snaps. That was not the case. For a third consecutive game, Zach Charbonnet outsnapped Kenneth Walker. It doesn't mean that it's going to impact Kenneth Walker's overall value, considering, again, he had himself 20 overall touches despite this. Going forward, again, Zach Charbonnet could get himself more opportunities. 6 carries for 44 rushing yards, 5 total targets, 4 receptions, 18 receiving yards. As long as he continues to get 10 plus touches, he's at that A.J. Dillon capacity of potential. Moving on to our number 6, we have Tyjae Spears. He continues to get utilized within this backfield, especially within the receiving game. 3 plus receptions in 5 of the last 6 games. Overall, over the course of that 6-game span, he's been RB 27, 9, 31, 42, 41, and 30. To be determined based on what Monday Night Football efforts look like, but at very worst, he'll probably be RB 32 within the given week. On average, he's an RB 3 option that, if in fact you have a PPR scoring format, could be of even greater value going into a given week. Okay, let's go on to the wide receiver conversation. Beginning with our 1 through 6, we begin with Demario Douglas. Again, Demario Douglas is going on bye week, but I wanted to mention him one final time. He's currently rostered in 36% of Yahoo leagues, so I thought I might as well go ahead and mention it once again. In each of the last 3 consecutive games, 7 or more targets. He led the team in terms of total targets yesterday, 9 total. He had 6 total receptions, 84 receiving yards. There wasn't another wide receiver within the New England Patriots offense yesterday who had themselves over 1 reception besides Demario Douglas. 11.4 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Going forward, hopefully he'll continue to be the number 1 receiving option regardless of who's playing quarterback for the New England Patriots. Moving on to our number 2, of course, we have Noah Brown, the thumbnail of today's episode. Noah Brown has been unbelievably great. In the last 2 games, he's had himself over 150 receiving yards in both contests, over 6 receptions, and continues to get himself a high volume of opportunity in one of the more exciting offenses in the National Football League, with CJ Stroud lighting up the National Football League. I did not expect the Houston Texans to go on the road in Cincinnati and put 30 points on that defense. Nonetheless, they did so. The expectation going forward is that even with Nico Collins returning, Noah Brown's going to be that number 2 or number 3 wide receiver every single week. It is going to pretty much exile Robert Woods to being the number 4 wide receiver within this offense. Going forward, Noah Brown, of course, will continue to have value considering his association with this offense, which of course is so pass happy. And considering the average depth of target that we witnessed from Noah Brown, continuing to make plays down the field on a consistent basis, and even had the game-winning reception to get this team into field goal range, with CJ Stroud feeling comfortable sending it in his direction to win the game. Of course, it gives me confidence going forward. Moving on to our number 3, we have Brandin Cooks. Brandin Cooks, just 1 week off. Last week against the Philadelphia Eagles, we expected him to play well. Well, he did it against another division rival, the Giants. 9 catches, 10 targets, 173 and a touchdown. An unbelievable performance of 27.8 fantasy points. Their upcoming schedule for the Cowboys: Carolina, Washington, Seattle, Philadelphia, Buffalo, Miami, Detroit. The final 4 games of the fantasy football season, highly competitive. Could see a lot more utilization out of Brandin Cooks, considering how well we have seen Dak Prescott play offensively. It's only going to elevate these overall other positions going forward. The next player I wanted to mention, number 4, Elijah Moore. He's currently rostered in 40+% of leagues, 42% on Yahoo, 47% on Sleeper. If in fact we're in a position in which, of course, he is available, going forward could be a value. He's had himself 7+ targets in 4 of the last 5 games he has played with a healthy Deshaun Watson. He's averaging only 7.18 half PPR fantasy points per game throughout those overall 5 games, but nonetheless, as long as those opportunities continue to pile up, like yesterday, 7 targets, 5 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown. If this offense continues to pile wins, of course, besides David Njoku and Amari Cooper finding success, Elijah Moore will be next in the overall receiving category. We move on to Jayden Reed. This is another consecutive week in which I mentioned him. Again, still only rostered in 21% of Yahoo leagues, 31% of Sleeper leagues. Since week 7, Jayden Reed leads all Packers wide receivers in receptions, receiving yards, and fantasy points. He's averaging over 10 fantasy points per game in the last 4 games. In terms of overall fantasy points of the wide receiver position for the Green Bay Packers, Romeo Dobbs is second in the last 4 games. Christian Watson is third. So going forward, again, Jayden Reed has value. They take on the Los Angeles Chargers this upcoming week. Should be a little bit more of a pass-happy experiment there for the Green Bay Packers offense. The final player I wanted to mention is Michael Wilson. Again, Michael Wilson was literally a half a yard shy of scoring a touchdown. They called him down at the 1-yard line. The following play was a rushing touchdown by Clayton Tune. As a Kyler Murray manager, I was a little bit peeved off about that, but nonetheless, going forward, Michael Wilson will see himself more opportunity. He played the second most offensive snaps amongst all wide receivers on the Arizona Cardinals, 89%, only behind Hollywood Brown, who played 100% over the overall offensive snaps and still only had himself 1 reception. That was quite surprising. Michael Wilson rostered in, 12% of leagues on Yahoo, should be readily available. The other wide receivers I wanted to mention, of course, once again, Quentin Johnston. We mention him every single week, finally scored his first touchdown of his career. Rondell Moore had himself 8 total targets, but of course was overshadowed by the fact that Trey McBride had himself over 100 receiving yards, an incredible performance. Zay Jones greatly needed within that offense. Outside of Christian Kirk, nobody else was doing anything yesterday. We needed a little bit of a boost. Hopefully Zay Jones can provide that. Trenton Irwin, again, we're assuming that T. Higgins is not going to be available, considering the fact that the Cincinnati Bengals take on the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday Night Football, so Trenton Irwin could be a value. Odell Beckham Jr. has scored a touchdown in each of the last 2 games, and Kyle Phillips, despite the fact that he sees himself a very small volume of overall snaps within a given game, is still one of the favorite targets of the rookie quarterback Will Levis. Moving on, let's talk about the tight end in quarterback conversation, beginning with our number 1 tight end, Pat Freiermuth. Pat Freiermuth has been on an injured reserve stint as of late. He's currently only rostered in 36% of Yahoo leagues, 40% of Sleeper leagues. They do take on the Cleveland Browns this week, which isn't the best overall matchup, but I specifically want to go ahead and mention Pat Freiermuth because of his fantasy playoff schedule. He takes on the Colts, Bengals, and Seahawks. Those are really advantageous games. If he's your second tight end on roster, you could potentially hold him for potential, injury situations and or bye weeks upcoming. Just keep that in mind. The second player, Tyler Conklin. In the last 2 weeks, Tyler Conklin has seen himself a lot of opportunity. Yesterday, Sunday Night Football against the Las Vegas Raiders. 7 receptions, 7 targets, 70 receiving yards, 10.5 fantasy points and a half PPR. Week 9 on Monday Night Football against the Los Angeles Chargers. 6 targets, 6 receptions, 66 receiving yards, 9.6 fantasy points. Again, a lot of opportunity going in his direction. He's the number 2 receiving option within this offense, only behind Garrett Wilson. As long as that's continuing to be the case, absolutely of value for fantasy purposes. Luke Musgrave is the next tight end I wanted to talk about. Again, he continues to see himself opportunity. Is it a high volume of opportunity? No. So I wanted to mention him in conjunction with a player like Michael Mayer. Again, both of these rookie tight ends, they have potential. They have touchdown upside. It's just a matter of, can we find them in great matchups within a given week in order to elevate their overall value? Now, when we talk about the quarterback conversation, beginning with Josh Dobbs has had himself over 22 fantasy points in, I think, the last 3 games for fantasy purposes. As long as he continues to string together great games, he scored himself a rushing touchdown in each of the last 4 games he has played, whether that has been with the Minnesota Vikings or Arizona Cardinals. He gets the return of Justin Jefferson back. I mean, all things are trending in the right direction. KJ Osborne should be healthy this upcoming week. Josh Dobbs hopefully was already rostered considering how highly I had him ranked last week, but hopefully if he is still available, you have an opportunity of picking him up considering how well he's been playing and the offense he's associated with in the winning streak they are pretty much piling up. Moving on to our number 2, Matthew Stafford. We heard earlier today Sean McVay, the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, specifically say that Matthew Stafford is expected to play in week 11. That's fantastic. They take on Seattle. Should be a pretty solid overall matchup against a division rival. The final player I wanted to mention is Jordan Love. Jordan Love currently rostered in 43% of leagues. If in fact, again, you were dealing with a situation where you haven't been able to find a steady quarterback option, perhaps you had Derek Carr last week, you need another option going into this week. I think Jordan Love taking on the Los Angeles Chargers secondary that has not played well at all this season, and their defense that absolutely got torched the other day, is expected to be a pretty solid matchup for him. Even though he consistently has a 50% passing completion percentage, he is absolutely a garbage man when it comes to fantasy points and is able to get himself a lot of fantasy upside in second half of games. Moving on to the final section of today's video, we'll talk about kickers and defenses. Beginning with our first kicker, rostered in only 11% of Yahoo leagues, we have Greg Joseph. He's had himself over 10 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 games. That consecutive streak of success will only continue considering how much, upside this offense has. Even though they don't have Kirk Cousins available, Joshua Dobbs is getting the job done and helping Greg Joseph score a high volume of fantasy points. We move on to Matt Amendola. Considering Kaimi Fairbairn was put on the injured reserve due to the injury that he sustained last week, the Houston Texans kicker still has value. Amendola had himself a high volume of points. As long as that continues to be the case, considering he's associated with an offense that is in the top 5 in terms of total field goal attempts this season, of course, he's going to continue to be of value. The final player I wanted to mention, who is also rostered in a very low percentage of leagues. I mean, Matt Amendola is 0%, Matt Prater 3%. With Kyler Murray's return, Matt Prater's potential fantasy upside continues to rise as long as they're put into far more scoring positions, which is obviously going to be the case going forward. When we talk about defenses, let's begin with the Detroit Lions. The upcoming schedule for the Detroit Lions consists of Chicago, Green Bay, Chicago, New Orleans, Denver, Minnesota, Dallas. In terms of the rest of the regular season, taking on Chicago twice, Green Bay once, New Orleans once, there is an expectation that the Detroit Lions defense could put together a couple great performances here upcoming. Only rostered in 30% of Yahoo leagues. Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. This upcoming week, they take on the rookie quarterback, Will Levis. Could force a lot of troubles for his overall situation. The final defense I wanted to mention are the Washington Commanders. They'll take on Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants, which of course were helpless yesterday against the Dallas Cowboys. I'm sure Saquon Barkley will be far more effective in the matchup against the Commanders, but I still think that the Washington Commanders will force a couple mistakes, get after the quarterback, and of course score a decent volume of fantasy points for those of you looking for a streaming option that is readily available in majority of leagues. Okay, that covers it for our waiver wire targets for week 11 of the 2023 fantasy football season. If you enjoyed today's content, be sure to go ahead and click the like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't yet already. We'll talk about running back rankings tomorrow, wide receivers on Wednesday, quarterback and tight ends on Thursday, rest of season rankings on Friday. Of course, Saturday live stream, Sunday live stream, all of that in order to help us capture a victory this week and, of course, a 2023 Fantasy Football Championship. Let's close out today's video by putting together a couple pick'em slips via Underdog Fantasy. Again, there's a link down in the description. If you haven't checked them out, use code Andrew. Make that first-time deposit minimum of $10 to get the first-time deposit match up to 100. So if you deposit 10, you'll get 10. If you deposit 100, you'll get 100 in-game currency. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of today's episode, since week 9, I have been on a hot streak. Of the last 21 suggested plays that I have made in terms of individual players, 17 of those players succeeded while only 4 failed. Again, an 81% success rate. We're talking about Derrick Henry, Deontay Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Aaron Jones, Demario Douglas, Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Garrett Wilson, Deontay Foreman, Bryce Young, Cole Kmet, Garrett Wilson again, Hawkinson, Wagner on the Orlando Magic, Schultz, Metcalf, and Amon-Ra. The only failed plays that we've seen as of late, Thielen in week 9 on that overall weekend performance, which was underwhelming. Thielen again in week 10, Thursday night. We had a week 9 Monday night matchup. Eckler did not play well, and Deebo Samuel yesterday. Those are the only 4 fails as of late. We also had 2 free plays of LeBron James and CJ Stroud throughout that span of time. So we've been winning a lot as of late. Nonetheless, we go into Monday Night Football. I've mentioned this all weekend long. My favorite play of this specific game is Gabriel Davis in all capacities. Gabriel Davis at 38.5 receiving yards is far too low. I understand they take on the Denver Broncos defense, and there could be a tough matchup on hand considering their secondary has played better in the last couple weeks. But thus far this season at home, Gabe Davis has been able to surpass 61 plus receiving yards in 4 of the last 5 games. We have mentioned it earlier this week. Josh Allen at home has an 8% better passing completion percentage, throws for an extra 1.35 passing touchdowns per game at home thus far this season, throws for 55 more receiving yards per game, and throws for 1 less interception per game at home. The expectation is that Gabriel Davis very easily is able to surpass this 38.5 receiving yard total. I've mentioned this on multiple occasions. Earlier this weekend, I also mentioned Dalton Kincaid. I was able to suggest his number of targets when it was at 6.0. They've moved it now to 8.0. Not really a surprise. That one's going to hit, and that's only going to increase our overall accuracy rating in terms of Underdog Pick'ems as of late. But I really do like Gabe Davis. Now, in order to put together a pick'em slip, you need a player from another team as well. So unless, I would feel, pretty confident playing a Stephon Diggs or, one of these Josh Allen plays. But if we need a player from the other team, the one that I'm willing to suggest going into tonight's game is Jaleel McLaughlin, surpassing his rushing yard total of 16.5 rushing yards. He's done that on a very consistent basis. In fact, I think he's averaging like 7 yards per carry this season within this offense. I think 16.5 rushing yards, getting over 17 should be an easy overall circumstance within the overall situation. They like to utilize him as the RB2 within the rushing capacity, and even though Javonte Williams will have himself a pretty good workload of opportunity, Jaleel McLaughlin is the next player that I wanted to mention. So obviously we'll put together that pick'em slip. I'll send that out right now. Nice little $10 entry. Now, the overall other plays that I've gone ahead and make, I'll go ahead and share with you for tonight's game right now. So the pick that you guys can see on screen is the one that I made yesterday morning while we were putting together the live stream. I suggested we go with these 3. Hopefully Gabe Davis hits on that and continues the streak of success, of course, in that overall capacity. Nonetheless, the play that I have for tonight, that is the multiplier is literally 26.25x, okay? This is not a suggestion. The suggestion I've already made. That's the one that I'm counting. This is just one that I'm just telling you, hey, if you want to take a $10 sprinkle on it, Gabe Davis anytime touchdown, again, rushing or receiving, he has scored a touchdown in 4 of the last 5 home games he's played this season. Cortland Sutton has scored a touchdown in 6 of the last 8 games he's played this season. And Josh Allen has scored a rushing touchdown in 6 of the last 7 games he's played this season. This is a $10 for $262.50 play. It's probably not going to hit, but I just wanted to mention it. Either way, thank you everybody for watching. Enjoy tonight's game. I'll be back tomorrow with running back rankings. And until next time, guys, I'll see you. Peace.